You are in medieval England, in the year 1375, experiencing life as an accidental time traveler with no guide, no preparation, and no way home. The cold seeps through your bones like a living thing, and the silence around you is so complete it feels like the world has forgotten how to breathe. The awakening: imagine waking up to a silence so profound it makes your ears ring. Not the comfortable quiet of a power outage or the muffled hush of snow, but the bone-deep silence of a world that has never heard electricity hum, never felt the distant rumble of traffic, never known the electronic heartbeat of modern life. That silence wraps around you like a shroud as consciousness creeps back into your aching body. Your first sensation is cold. Not the crisp, clean cold of air conditioning, but a damp, invasive chill that seems to rise from the earth itself and settle into your marrow. Your second sensation is the smell. Wood smoke mingles with something earthy and organic, something that speaks of unwashed bodies, animal waste, and the heavy musk of a world that has never known soap. The third sensation, the one that makes your stomach drop like a stone, is the realization that your phone has no signal. You sit up slowly, your head spinning with a cocktail of confusion and growing dread. The darkness around you is not the familiar darkness of a modern night, softened by streetlights and the glow of digital clocks. This is medieval darkness, thick and absolute, broken only by the distant flicker of firelight dancing between twisted tree branches. You reach instinctively for your phone, that modern lifeline, and watch the battery percentage mock you with its pathetic 3%. No bars, no GPS, no connection to anything that makes sense. The forest around you breathes with an alien rhythm. These are not the managed, protected woodlands of your time, but working forests, harvested and scavenged by people who see every fallen branch as fuel, every berry as sustenance, every shadow as potential danger. The trees lean close like gossips sharing secrets, their branches scarred by axes and their undergrowth trampled by feet that know these paths by necessity, not leisure. You struggle to your feet, fighting the disorientation that comes with finding yourself in a world that operates by completely different rules. The ground beneath your feet is not the predictable surface of sidewalks and parking lots, but uneven earth, soft with moss in some places, treacherous with hidden roots in others. Your modern shoes, so sensible and practical in your own time, feel suddenly foreign and suspicious. The synthetic materials, the machine-perfect stitching, the rubber soles designed for concrete and asphalt, all mark you as clearly as if you wore a neon sign proclaiming your origins. But here is where your survival instincts, dormant for so long in a world of convenience and safety, begin to awaken. You understand, with a clarity that surprises you, that standing out is dangerous. In this time, this place, being different means being dead. You begin the first of many painful adaptations, stripping away the comfortable markers of your identity. Your shoes go first, hidden beneath a pile of leaves. Your jacket, with its tellate zippers and synthetic fibers, gets buried deeper in the forest. By the time you approach the distant glow of the village, you look like someone who might, with luck and poor lighting, belong. The village emerges from the darkness like something from a fever dream. Houses lean against each other for support, their timber frames packed with mud and straw, their thatched roofs dark against the pre-dawn sky. Smoke rises from crude chimneys, and the air carries the scent of cooking fires, animal waste, and something indefinably human that speaks of too many people living too close together with too little water for washing. You approach cautiously, your bare feet silent on the packed earth of what passes for a road. The gate to the village stands open, and you slip through with a small group of early risers, traders and laborers beginning their day. No one challenges you. No one asks for identification or travel papers. In this world, your story is your passport, and you have not yet learned to tell a convincing lie. The narrow streets wind between buildings that seem to defy gravity, their upper stories jutting out over the walkways like wooden cliffs. Chickens dart between your feet, and somewhere a blacksmith is already at work. The ringing of hammer on anvil, providing a rhythmic soundtrack to the awakening town. The smell of bread, real bread baked in wood-fired ovens, mingles with less pleasant odors, creating a sensory cocktail that is both appealing and overwhelming. You realize, as you stand in this alien familiar place, that you have crossed more than time. You have crossed into a world where survival is not guaranteed, where comfort is not expected, where every day begins with the simple hope of reaching evening alive and fed. The weight of that realization settles on your shoulders like a mantle, heavy and inescapable. A woman passes by, her wooden clogs clicking on the stones, a basket balanced on her hip. She glances at you with the quick, assessing look of someone who knows that strangers can mean trouble. You lower your eyes, already learning the first rule of medieval survival: do not be interesting. Her gaze moves on, and you release a breath you did not know you were holding. The sun begins to rise, painting the sky in shades of grey and gold, and you take your first real look at your new world. It is beautiful in its own harsh way, unmarked by power lines or pollution. Its rhythms dictated by sunrise and sunset rather than clocks and schedules. But it is also unforgiving, a place where weakness is culled quickly and quietly, where the line between life and death is drawn in mud and maintained by constant vigilance. You pull your borrowed cloak tighter around your shoulders and begin to walk, your feet finding the rhythm of cobblestones and packed earth. Somewhere in this maze of medieval streets, you will need to find food, shelter, and safety. But first, you will need to find yourself a story, because in this world, you are nothing without a story. And the story you choose may well determine whether you live to see another medieval dawn. The art of becoming no one. The morning bells of the priory ring out across the village like a summons from another world. And you realize, with growing unease, that you are expected to respond. In this time, religion is not a private matter relegated to weekends and holidays, but the beating heart of daily life. Every bell demands acknowledgement. Every prayer requires participation, and your ignorance of these rituals marks you as surely as your strange accent and two soft hands. You follow the flow of people toward the church, a stone building that dominates the village center like a granite mountain. The crowd moves with practiced efficiency, their heads bowed, their lips moving in silent prayers you cannot hope to replicate. You mimic their posture, mumbling nonsense syllables under your breath, and hoping that faith, like everything else in this world, can be faked convincingly enough to ensure survival. Inside the church, the air is thick with incense and something else, something that takes you a moment to identify as the scent of unwashed humanity pressed together in forced intimacy. The congregation stands close enough that you can feel the warmth of their bodies, close enough that their coughs and whispers create a constant undertone to the Latin prayers echoing from the altar. You stand among them, a fraud in borrowed clothes, and try to look devout while fighting the urge to flee. But it is here, in this crowd of medieval believers, that you meet the first person who will shape your survival. She notices you first, though you do not realize it at the time. Margot of the Healing Hands, though she will not tell you her name for days yet, watches from the shadows near the altar as you stumble through responses you do not understand. She sees the way you hold yourself, too straight for someone born to servitude, too careful for someone raised in poverty. She sees the confusion in your eyes when the priest raises the communion wafer, the panic when everyone around you begins to cross themselves. After the service, as the crowd disperses into the grey morning, she approaches with the deliberate casualness of someone who has made a decision. She is perhaps 52 years old, though the hard lines of her face make age difficult to determine. Her dress is simple, practical, the brown wool of someone who works with her hands. But there is something in her eyes, a sharp intelligence that seems to catalogue your every weakness, that makes you understand immediately that this is not a woman to be underestimated. You are new to our prayers, she says, and it is not a question. Her voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, though she speaks quietly enough that others cannot overhear. Come, you look hungry. You follow her because you have no choice, and because, despite your wariness, she is the first person in this strange world to offer kindness without suspicion. Her cottage sits at the edge of the village, where the ordered streets give way to tangled gardens and the wild spaces beyond. It is small but neat, with herb gardens that speak of knowledge passed down through generations, and a door painted with symbols you do not recognize but somehow understand to be protective. Inside, the cottage is warm in a way that has nothing to do with the small fire crackling in the hearth. The walls are lined with shelves holding pottery jars filled with dried herbs, mysterious powders, and liquids that seem to glow with their own inner light. The air smells of chamomile and something sharper, something that makes your nose tingle and your eyes water slightly. Margot moves through this space with the confidence of absolute ownership, brewing tea in a pot that has clearly seen decades of use and cutting bread with a knife whose blade has been sharpened so many times it curves like a crescent moon. She does not speak while she works, but you feel her watching you, measuring your reactions to her home, her habits, her quiet power. Eat, she says finally, placing a bowl before you. The stew is simple but nourishing, barley and vegetables in a broth that tastes of herbs you cannot name. You eat gratefully, the first real meal you have had since your arrival, and feel some of the tension leave your shoulders. You are not from here, she says when you have finished. Your hands are too soft, your back too straight. You speak our words, but not our music. You consider lying, crafting some story about distant villages and long travels. But something in her manner suggests that deception would be both futile and dangerous. Instead, you tell her a partial truth. I am lost, you say, further from home than I ever intended to be. She nods, as if this explains everything. Lost ones come to me, she says. The sick, the desperate, the ones who need healing that goes deeper than herbs can reach. She pauses, studying your face. You are sick in your soul, but not in your body. Not yet, not yet. You ask, and she smiles, an expression that holds more knowledge than comfort. This world will test you, she says. Your body, raised on clean water and abundant food, will struggle with our ways. Your mind, accustomed to safety and certainty, will crack under the weight of daily survival. Many who come to me arrive on the edge of death, believing that foreign magic brought them low. She rises and moves to one of her shelves, selecting a small pottery jar with the care of someone choosing the perfect weapon. This will help, she says, measuring a careful portion of dark powder into a cloth pouch. Willow bark for pain, mint for the stomach troubles that will come, and other things that work by faith as much as nature. You take the pouch, feeling the weight of it in your palm. What do you want in return? Her smile grows sharper. A promise, she says. You will never speak of what you see here, never repeat the names of my remedies or describe my methods. And when the time comes, as it will, you will forget that you ever knew me. Why, you ask, though you suspect you already know the answer. Because, she says, returning to her seat by the fire, some healing works too well for this time and place, and some knowledge, if spoken carelessly, can burn both the speaker and the listener. You understand, then, that you have stumbled into one of the hidden truths of medieval life, that beneath the official prayers and sanctioned remedies, older knowledge persists, that desperate people will seek desperate measures, and that sometimes those measures work well enough to be dangerous. You nod your agreement, sealing a bargain that you do not yet fully comprehend. She sends you away with the medicine and a warning to return if the need becomes great. But as you walk back toward the village center, you carry with you more than herbs. You carry the knowledge that survival in this world will require more than adapting to new customs or learning new languages. It will require understanding the hidden currents that flow beneath the surface of medieval life, the networks of knowledge and power that operate outside the official structures of church and state. You have met your first guide in this strange world, and though you do not yet know it, she has begun the process that will either save your life or seal your doom. Because in a world where difference means death, having a protector is both a blessing and a curse, and the price of her protection may be higher than you are prepared to pay. The afternoon finds you wandering the market square, trying to look purposeful while having no particular purpose at all. You have learned, in these few days of medieval life, that idleness is suspicious. Everyone here belongs to something: a household, a guild, a trade, a master. To be unattached is to be dangerous, a potential threat to the carefully maintained order that keeps the village functioning. You practice blending in, copying the gait and posture of the other villagers, learning to lower your eyes when anyone of obvious importance passes by. You are beginning to understand that medieval life is a performance, and that everyone knows their role except you. The weight of words the morning you wake to find your throat raw and your voice cracked with illness. You realize that language will be your greatest enemy in this medieval world, not because you cannot speak, but because every word you utter betrays you. Your accent, so carefully practiced in your own time, sounds foreign in the mouth of every villager you meet. Your vocabulary, assembled from textbooks and historical films, belongs to no place these people have ever heard of. You learned this lesson painfully the day before, when you attempted to purchase bread from the baker's wife using what you thought was perfectly acceptable Middle English. You approached her stall with confidence, pointed to a dark loaf, and said clearly, "Good morrow, dame. I would fain purchase this bread for my repast." The woman stared at you as if you had spoken in tongues. Several other customers turned to look, their expressions ranging from confusion to suspicion. An older man, with the scarred hands of a carpenter, stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Where learned you to speak so?" he asked, his own words thick with the local dialect that turns every sentence into a puzzle. "No one hereabouts talks like a book." You felt heat rising your cheeks as you realized your mistake. Your Middle English was too formal, too precise, like someone who had learned the language from scholarly texts, rather than growing up with it as a living, breathing thing. You mumbled an apology and fled, leaving behind not only the bread you wanted, but also a growing reputation as someone who did not quite belong. Now, with your throat aching and your voice barely above a whisper, you see an opportunity in your affliction. A sore throat provides the perfect excuse for speaking little and poorly. You can mumble, gesture, and communicate through nods and grimaces without raising suspicion. For the first time since your arrival, your physical discomfort serves a useful purpose. You make your way to the market again, this time armed with the knowledge that less is more. When the fishmonger asks what you want, you point and grunt. When the baker's wife asks where you come from, you touch your throat and shake your head sadly. Sympathy, you discover, is a universal language that requires no words at all. But your linguistic challenges extend far beyond accent and vocabulary. You are learning that medieval English is not one language, but dozens, each varying by region, class, and circumstance. The nobles speak a mixture of French and Latin with English words sprinkled in like seasoning. The merchants use terms borrowed from a dozen different trading languages. The common folk speak in dialects so thick and localized that villagers from 20 miles away might struggle to understand each other. You witness this firsthand when a traveling tinker arrives in the village. He speaks with an accent so different from the locals that the first few minutes of every conversation sound like negotiation, each party repeating themselves until meaning emerges from the confusion. You watch and learn, understanding that your own linguistic struggles are not unique, but part of the natural order of a world where communication is always imperfect, always requiring patience and goodwill. But patience and goodwill are luxuries you cannot always count on. You discover this when you encounter Willis, the young blacksmith's apprentice whose curiosity proves more dangerous than any suspicion. He is perhaps 17 years old, with the broad shoulders and calloused hands of someone raised to work with fire and iron, but his eyes hold an intelligence that makes you immediately wary. He notices you first on a grey morning when you are attempting to mime your way through a transaction with the rope maker. You need cord to replace the synthetic material that tied your belongings, but explaining this without revealing your modern origins proves nearly impossible. You point, gesture, and finally resort to drawing crude pictures in the dirt with a stick. Willers watches this performance with growing fascination. When the rope maker finally understands what you want and wanders off to find suitable cord, the young man approaches with the confidence of someone who has decided you are worth investigating. You speak strangely, he says without preamble. Not strangely bad, but strangely careful, like someone afraid their words will betray them. You touch your throat again and attempt to look pitiful, but Willis is not fooled. Your throat pains you, I can see that. But it pained you yesterday too, and the day before. How long can one throat ailment last? You realize with growing alarm that you have been observed more closely than you knew. In your effort to blend in, you have made yourself memorable to exactly the wrong person. An intelligent young man with too much time and too much curiosity. You carry no tools, he continues, warming to his subject. You know no trade that anyone can name. You eat like someone accustomed to better food, walk like someone who has never worked with his hands, and start at sounds that would not surprise a child. Each observation hits like a physical blow. You have underestimated how much your modern life has shaped your body, your reflexes, your unconscious reactions to the world around you. You flinch at the clash of metal on metal because you have never lived with the constant noise of hand forging. You walk upright because you have never spent your days bent over crops or crafts. You eat carefully because your stomach, raised on processed foods and clean water, rebels against the medieval diet that others take for granted. Willers seems to take your silence as encouragement. I have been thinking, he says, about the tools you must have carried when you arrived. Good tools, well made, but of patterns I do not recognize. Where might such tools be made? Your blood turns to ice. He has been thinking, this dangerous young man, and his thoughts are leading him uncomfortably close to the truth. You touch your throat again and shake your head, but his eyes have taken on the gleam of someone who has found a puzzle worth solving. Perhaps, he says, when your voice returns, you will tell me of these distant places where such fine work is done. I should like to learn new techniques. You nod non-committally and escape as quickly as your dignity allows. But the damage is done. You have been noticed, studied, and found wanting. Worse, you have been found interesting, and interesting is the last thing you want to be in a world where difference means danger. That evening, as you lie on your straw mattress in the corner of the monastery's guest hall, you take inventory of your failures. Your accent betrays your origins. Your posture reveals your past. Your reactions expose your ignorance. Even your illnesses mark you as foreign. Your bodies struggle with medieval conditions, a constant reminder that you do not belong here. But as you listen to the snores and whispers of your fellow travelers, you begin to understand something important about medieval communication. It is not just about words, but about silence, about the things left unsaid, the questions not asked, the truths everyone agrees to ignore. You have been thinking like someone from your own time, where information wants to be free and curiosity is encouraged. Here, information is dangerous, and curiosity can kill. You resolve to become better at silence, at deflection, at the subtle art of being uninteresting. You will perfect your cough, refine your gesture, and learn to communicate just enough to survive without revealing enough to condemn yourself. Because in this world of careful words and dangerous questions, your life may depend on learning when not to speak at all. But even as you make this resolution, you know that Willers will not forget his questions, and somewhere in the darkness of the medieval night, You begin to plan for the confrontation you know must come. The moment when silence will no longer be enough and you will have to choose between truth and survival. The weight of that choice settles on your chest like a stone, and you drift toward sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring new tests of your ability to be someone you are not. In a world that shows no mercy to those who fail to convince the watchers and the watched, the fever comes on the third day after your encounter with Willers. Arriving like an unwelcome guest who refuses to leave, you wake shivering despite the wool blanket pulled tight around your shoulders, your skin burning hot while your bones ache with cold. This is not the gentle illness of your modern world, easily treated with medicine and rest, but the brutal sickness of medieval life, where recovery is a negotiation between your body and forces beyond your control. You stumble from your sleeping place in the monastery's guest hall, trying to maintain the pretense of health even as your legs threaten to buckle beneath you. But there is no hiding illness in a world where people live pressed together like sardines, where every cough is heard and every stumble noticed. Within an hour, word has spread through the village like ripples in a pond. The strange pilgrim is sick. This news reaches different ears with different meanings. To some, you are simply another unfortunate soul succumbing to the seasonal fevers that claim their share every year. But to others, your illness confirms what they have already begun to suspect, that you are not what you claim to be. Foreign diseases, they whisper, brought by foreign people. Punishment for foreign sins. Father Aldrich finds you collapsed against the monastery wall, your face grey with exhaustion and your breathing shallow. He is a man of perhaps 45 years, with the soft hands of someone who has never worked fields, but the sharp eyes of someone who has spent his life reading both books and souls. He approaches with the careful steps of someone accustomed to sickness and death, his brown robes rustling in the morning breeze. "Come," he says, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. You cannot recover in the cold. You want to protest, to maintain your independence, but your body has moved beyond your control. You allow him to help you to your feet, leaning more heavily on his arm than your pride would prefer. He guides you not to the main monastery building, but to a smaller structure behind it, a place that smells of herbs and clean straw. The infirmary is simple but clean, with narrow beds arranged along the walls and shelves lined with pottery jars containing the monastery's collection of healing remedies. Sunlight streams through small windows, creating patterns on the stone floor that shift and dance as clouds pass overhead. It is a place of healing, but also of watching, and you sense immediately that your presence here will be noted and remembered. Father Aldrich settles you onto one of the beds, his movements efficient and practiced. "I have tended many travelers," he says, pulling a rough blanket up to your chin. "Pilgrims carry many burdens, not all of them visible." There is something in his tone that makes you look at him more carefully. His Latin, when he murmurs a blessing over you, is flawless, but his English carries the subtle variations that speak of education beyond the local norm. This is not a simple village priest, but someone whose past holds depths you cannot fathom. "Rest," he says, but his eyes suggest that rest is not what he has in mind for you. "I will return with medicine." Left alone in the infirmary, you try to gather your scattered thoughts. Fever has a way of stripping away pretense, of reducing everything to its essential truth. You are sick, alone, and increasingly certain that your carefully constructed identity is beginning to crumble. The question is not whether you will be discovered, but when, and by whom. Your answer comes sooner than expected. As the afternoon light begins to fade, you hear voices approaching the infirmary, speaking in tones too low to be casual conversation. The door opens to admit not just Father Aldrich, but to others whose presence makes your fevered old mind struggle to alertness. The first is a girl of perhaps 13 years, with the pale eyes and silent manner of someone who has learned that survival depends on being overlooked. Her name, you will learn, is Senna, though she offers no introduction. She moves through the infirmary like a ghost, tidying shelves and checking supplies, with the efficiency of someone who knows this space intimately. But her eyes, when they rest on you, hold a knowledge that seems far older than her years. The second visitor makes your heart race with recognition and fear. Willers has come calling, his apprentice's leather apron replaced by a clean tunic that speaks of special occasion. He carries himself with the confidence of someone who has been invited here, not someone who has forced his way in. And in his hand he holds something that makes your blood turn to ice, a small metal object that glints in the lamplight. "I found this," he says without preamble, holding up what you recognize with sinking heart as one of the buttons from your modern jacket, the one you thought you had buried so carefully in the forest, near the old oak, buried shallow like someone thought the earth would keep secrets. Father Aldrich takes the button, turning it over in his fingers with the careful attention of someone examining evidence. "The metal work is strange," he says, "too precise for local smiths, too uniform for hand forging." "Exactly what I thought," Willers says, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone whose theories have been confirmed. "No smith in England makes fastenings like this. Perhaps no smith in Christendom." Sina says nothing, but you see her eyes flick between your face and the button, cataloguing details in a way that suggests she has been doing this longer than her years would suggest. She knows, you realize, perhaps not the full truth, but enough to be dangerous. "There is more," Willers continues, warming to his subject. "I have been asking questions about pilgrims, about travelers, about the routes to Santiago and Canterbury." He pauses for effect. "No one remembers our friend here coming through any of the towns he claims to have visited. No innkeeper, no stable master, no priest." You close your eyes, feeling the weight of discovery settling on your chest like a stone. Your carefully constructed backstory, so convincing in your own mind, has been unraveled by a 17-year-old blacksmith with too much intelligence and too much time. Father Aldrich sets the button on the table beside your bed, the small metal disc somehow ominous in its simplicity. "Perhaps," he says carefully, "our guest has been too fevered to remember his journey clearly. Illness can cloud the mind, make distant memories seem uncertain. It is an offer of escape, you realize, a chance to blame your inconsistencies on sickness rather than deception. But the offer comes with a price, one that you can read in the priest's steady gaze. He wants something in return for his protection, some truth that will satisfy his curiosity without endangering either of you. "I remember little of my journey," you say, your voice hoarse with fever and fear. The roads blur together, and faces fade like dreams. Willers looks skeptical, but Father Aldrich nods as if this explanation satisfies him. "Rest, then," he says. "When the fever breaks, perhaps your memory will clear." But you know, as they file out of the infirmary, that this is only a temporary reprieve. Willers will continue his investigations, Senna will continue her silent watching, and Father Aldrich will continue his careful questioning. And sooner or later, your answers will not be enough. That night, as fever makes your dreams vivid and strange, you dream of home. Not the physical place, but the idea of it. A world where your identity is confirmed by documents and databases, where your story is verified by digital traces impossible to forge or forget. You dream of a world where being different is protected rather than punished, where curiosity is encouraged rather than feared. You wake to find Senna sitting beside your bed, her pale eyes reflecting the dim light of a single candle. She has been watching you, you realize, listening to your fevered mumblings, cataloguing your secrets. "You speak strangely when you dream," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "Words I do not know, names that sound like no place in this world." You try to speak, to offer some explanation, but she holds up a small hand to silence you. "I know about secrets," she says, "about the things we bury in the woods, hoping the earth will keep them safe." She reaches into the folds of her simple dress and withdraws something that makes your heart stop, a small electronic device, weathered and mud-stake, but unmistakably modern. Your emergency radio, the one you thought was hidden so cleverly in the forest. I followed you, she says simply. I know where you bury things. I know what you take out when you think no one is watching. She pauses, studying your face in the candlelight. I know you are not from any place that has a name in this world. The admission hangs between you like a blade, sharp and dangerous. You wait for her to continue, to make her demands or threats, but instead she carefully returns the radio to its hiding place in her dress. I will not tell, she says, but others will discover what I have discovered. Willers is clever, and Father Aldrich sees more than he admits. You cannot stay hidden much longer. What do you want? You ask, your voice barely audible. Her smile is sad and knowing, the expression of someone who has learned too much about the world too young. I want to learn how to disappear, she says, how to become someone else, someone who belongs nowhere and everywhere. You have done this thing, this impossible thing. Teach me how. You understand then that Senna is not just a servant or orphan, but someone with her own secrets to hide, her own reasons for wanting to vanish. In her pale eyes, you see the reflection of your own desperation, your own need to become invisible in a world that shows no mercy to those who do not fit its narrow definitions of normal. It is not a skill you would want, you tell her. The price is everything you are. Everything I am is nothing, she replies. I have already paid that price. Now I want to learn how to make it worthwhile. The fever breaks near dawn, leaving you weak but clear-headed for the first time in days. Senna has vanished as silently as she appeared, but the memory of her visit remains sharp and troubling. You have gained an ally, perhaps, but also another person who knows your secret. The circle of knowledge grows larger and more dangerous with each passing day. Father Aldrich returns with the morning bells, bringing thin porridge and watered wine. He sits beside your bed as you eat, his presence both comforting and threatening. You are recovering well, he says. Soon you will be strong enough to continue your journey. There is something in his tone that suggests this is not entirely a choice. You are being encouraged to move on, to take your mysteries and your questions somewhere else. The monastery has provided sanctuary, but that sanctuary has limits. Where would you suggest I go? You ask. His smile is careful, calculated. Canterbury is always welcoming to pilgrims, he says. Or perhaps Santiago, if your devotion runs toward distant saints. You understand the message. Go far away, and do not return. The knowledge you represent, the questions you raise, are not welcome in this quiet village where life follows patterns established by generations of careful tradition. But as you prepare to leave the infirmary, you know that escape will not be so simple. Willers will not be satisfied with your departure. Senna will not forget her request for teaching. And somewhere in the village, other watchers observe and calculate, weighing the value of your secrets against the danger of letting you keep them. The game of survival has entered a new phase, one where running away may not be enough to ensure safety. You must become not just invisible, but valuable enough to protect and dangerous enough to fear. Because in medieval England, the only security lies in being either too useful to discard or too frightening to challenge. And you are running out of time to decide which you would rather be. The weight of gold and guilt the merchant arrives on a Tuesday morning when the mist still clings to the village like reluctant sleep, his wagon creaking under the weight of goods that catch the early light and whisper of distant places. Aldwin, the wanderer, he calls himself, though his accent suggests origins no more exotic than the next county over. But in medieval England, even the next county can seem like a foreign land, and his wares speak of travels that most villagers can only imagine. You watch him from the shadows of the monastery wall, your newly recovered strength allowing you to move with something approaching confidence. The fever has left you thinner but sharper, your senses honed by the constant awareness that discovery lurks behind every careless word or gesture. And there is something about this merchant that sets your survival instincts humming like a tuning fork. He is perhaps 36 years old. with the weathered hands of someone who has spent years handling goods and coins. But his eyes hold an intelligence that suggests his true trade is information rather than merchandise. His wagon contains the usual traveling stock, lengths of wool, pottery vessels, iron tools dulled by use and sharpened by necessity. But nestled among these ordinary items are things that make you look twice. A mirror that reflects images too clearly, glass beads that seem to glow with inner light, and coins stamped with symbols you cannot identify. The villagers gather around his wagon with the eager attention of people starved for novelty, their voices rising in excitement as they examine his wares. But you notice that Aldwin watches the crowd as much as they watch his goods, his gaze lingering on faces, cataloguing reactions, measuring the weight of each person's interest and purse. When his eyes find you, standing apart from the crowd with your pilgrim's cloak and carefully neutral expression, they pause and narrow slightly. You feel the familiar chill of recognition, the sense that you have been seen and measured and found interesting in ways that spell danger. "You there?" he calls, his voice carrying easily over the market noise. "Pilgrim, come closer. I have something that might interest one who has traveled far roads." Every instinct screams at you to turn away, to fade back into the shadows where safety lives. But to refuse would draw more attention than compliance. You approach his wagon with the reluctant steps of someone who knows they are walking into a trap but cannot see a way around it. Aldwin reaches into a leather pouch and withdraws something that makes your heart stop, a small brass object, intricate and precise, that looks remarkably like a compass. Not your compass, which still lies buried in the forest, but something similar enough to make your mouth go dry with fear. "Found this on the roads north of here," he says, conversationally, turning the object over in his hands. "Strange workmanship, wouldn't you agree? Too fine for local smiths, too practical for decoration." He pauses, his eyes never leaving your face. "Have you seen anything like it in your travels?" The question hangs in the air like a blade, sharp and dangerous. Around you, the crowd has grown quieter, sensing drama even if they do not understand its source. You feel their attention like heat against your skin, their curiosity a weight that threatens to crush your carefully constructed invisibility. "I am not learned in the ways of foreign crafts," you say carefully, your voice steady despite the hammering of your heart. "My pilgrimage teaches me to value spiritual treasures over earthly ones." Aldwin's smile suggests he appreciates your deflection without being fooled by it. "Wise words," he says, "but sometimes earthly treasures can point us towards spiritual truths. This device, for instance, seems designed to show direction. A useful thing for a pilgrim, one might think." The conversation has moved beyond casual interest into something more dangerous. You sense trapdoors opening beneath your feet, questions that will lead to more questions until the weight of deception becomes too much to bear. But before you can formulate a response, an unexpected voice cuts through the tension. "It is beautiful work," says Lady Constance de Beaumont, her cultured tones carrying the authority of noble birth, even though her travel-stained cloak speaks of reduced circumstances. She steps forward from the crowd, her chin raised in the manner of someone accustomed to being heard. "My father owned something similar, brought back from the Crusades. You have seen her before, this displaced noblewoman who walks through the village like someone trying to remember how to be humble. 28 years old, with the bearing of someone who has known privilege and lost it. She carries herself with the careful pride of fallen aristocracy. Her intervention surprises you, but her motivation quickly becomes clear. Perhaps," she continues, her gaze moving meaningfully between you and Aldwin, "we might discuss this matter more privately. I am certain the good pilgrim has more important matters to attend to than examining merchant curiosities. It is a dismissal disguised as courtesy, and you seize it gratefully. You bow to both merchant and lady, murmur something about prayers waiting to be said, and escape before the conversation can deepen into more dangerous waters. But as you walk away, You hear Aldwin's voice following you like a shadow. I shall be in the village for several days, he calls. Perhaps we will have occasion to speak again. That evening, as you kneel in the monastery chapel, pretending to pray while actually planning your next move, Lady Constance finds you. She approaches with the silent steps of someone who knows how to move unseen, a skill that speaks of her own need for concealment. We need to talk, she says without preamble, settling onto the bench beside you with the familiarity of shared secrets. That merchant is not what he appears to be. Neither are most people, you reply, your eyes still fixed on the altar where candles flicker like captured stars. She laughs softly, a sound that holds more bitterness than humor. True enough, but Aldwin deals in more than goods. He collects stories, secrets, information that can be sold to the highest bidder. And he has decided that you are interesting enough to investigate. Why are you telling me this? You ask, finally turning to meet her gaze. Her smile is sharp and calculating, because we both have reasons to avoid scrutiny. You for your obvious secrets, and I for mine. She pauses, studying your face in the candlelight. I propose an alliance. You help me with something I need, and I help you disappear before Aldwin can dig too deeply into your past. What kind of help, you ask, though you suspect you already know. In a world where power is everything and security is nothing, alliances are built on mutual need and maintained by mutual threat. I need to leave this place, she says simply. Not just the village, but this life. There are people at court who would be very interested to know where Lady Constance de Beaumont has been hiding. I need to become someone else, someone unremarkable enough to vanish into the countryside. You understand then why she intervened with Aldwin, why she seeks your company now. She recognizes in you a fellow refugee from identity, someone who has successfully transformed themselves from one thing into another. She wants to learn the art of becoming invisible, the same lesson that Senna requested in her whispered conversation beside your sickbed. And in return, you ask, I know the pilgrim routes, she says, the real ones, not the paths that merchants and cutthroats follow. I know which monasteries ask too many questions, and which ones are content to accept a donation in exchange for silence. I know how to travel safely for someone who cannot afford to be memorable. It is a tempting offer, the promise of guidance through a world that grows more dangerous with each day of your stay. But alliances with desperate nobles carry their own risks, and you have already learned that in medieval England, today's ally can become tomorrow's betrayer with shocking speed. I need time to consider, you tell her. She nods, rising with the fluid grace of someone trained from birth in the art of noble bearing. Do not take too long, she warns. Aldwin is clever and patient, and very good at discovering things that people prefer to keep hidden. If you wait too long to decide, the decision may be made for you. She disappears into the shadows of the chapel, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and the weight of choice. You remain kneeling before the altar, your mind racing through possibilities and consequences, until the bell tower chimes the hour for Compline, and you must join the others in prayer. But even as you murmur the familiar Latin words, your thoughts are elsewhere, calculating distances and dangers, weighing the risk of alliance against the certainty of discovery. Because somewhere in the village, Aldwin sits in his comfortable lodgings, examining his mysterious compass and planning questions that you cannot afford to answer. The game has entered its final phase, where every move carries the weight of survival and every choice leads either to freedom or destruction. You have perhaps 2 days before Aldwin loses patience with subtlety and begins asking questions that even your carefully crafted answers cannot deflect. 2 days to decide whether to trust a fallen noblewoman with secrets as dangerous as your own. 2 days to choose between the uncertainty of flight and the growing certainty of exposure. 2 days to discover whether you have learned enough about medieval survival to escape not just this village, but this entire impossible situation. The candles flicker in the chapel drafts, their light wavering like your confidence. but in their dancing shadows, you begin to see the outline of a plan, dangerous and desperate, but perhaps possible, because sometimes the only way to escape a trap is to spring it yourself, on your own terms, with your own timing. And in medieval England, timing is everything. The price of truth, the morning of your planned escape, dawns grey and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that turns medieval roads into rivers of mud and makes every step a negotiation with gravity. You wake before the monastery bells, your body trained now to the rhythms of a world that measures time by prayer and light, rather than the digital precision of your former life. Today, you will either disappear forever into the anonymous masses of medieval England, or you will die trying. Your preparations have been careful and quiet. Over the past 2 days, you have slowly moved your hidden supplies from their forest cache to a new location closer to the village edge. Cached supplies and emergency gear wrapped in oiled cloth and buried beneath a distinctive pile of stones. Lady Constance has kept her word, providing detailed knowledge of the pilgrim routes that wind through the English countryside like secret arteries, carrying the desperate and the devout away from their old lives toward uncertain salvation. But the best laid plans in medieval times have a way of unraveling with shocking speed, and yours begins to collapse before you have even left your sleeping place in the monastery guest hall. You wake to find Senna sitting beside your straw mattress, her pale eyes bright with urgency and her small hands twisted together in a gesture that speaks of barely controlled panic. "He knows," she whispers, her voice so low you must strain to hear it over the snores of sleeping pilgrims around you. "Aldwyn. He has been asking questions all night, offering silver for information about strange pilgrims and foreign objects." Your blood turns to ice water, but you force your expression to remain calm. In this world, panic is a luxury that can kill you faster than any disease or blade. "What kind of questions?" "About buried things," she says, her eyes never leaving your face. "About places in the forest where the earth has been disturbed. About travelers who arrive with no past and leave no trail." She pauses, her voice growing even quieter. "He offered 5 silver pennies for information about a pilgrim who dreams in foreign tongues and carries devices that no smith has ever forged." 5 silver pennies. In a world where most villagers see only copper coins from one season to the next, it is a fortune that would feed a family for months, enough to buy silence or shatter it completely, depending on who is listening and how desperate they have become. "Who told him about my dreams?" you ask, though you suspect you already know the answer. Senna's expression grows pained. "Brother Marcus, who tends the guest hall at night. He listens to the travelers, partly from duty and partly from curiosity." When Aldwyn offered silver for such specific information, ... double quotes, she shrugs helplessly. "Marcus has a sister whose children go hungry more often than not." You understand without being told that Brother Marcus has already accepted Aldwyn's silver and provided whatever information he could gather from your fevered mumblings and restless sleep. The net is closing with the inexorable pressure of medieval justice, where suspicion quickly becomes accusation and accusation becomes condemnation. "How long do I have?" you ask. "Not long," Senna replies. Aldwyn plans to present his evidence to Father Aldrich after morning prayers. He believes the priest can be convinced to hold you for questioning by the church authorities. Church authorities. The words hit you like physical blows, carrying with them images of trials where the outcome is predetermined and punishments that make death seem merciful. In 14th century England, the church wields power that extends far beyond spiritual matters, and a merchant with the right connections can easily arrange for inconvenient questions to be asked in very uncomfortable ways. But even as despair threatens to overwhelm you, your mind begins to work with the cold clarity that comes from absolute necessity. If you cannot outrun discovery, perhaps you can control it. If you cannot avoid questions, perhaps you can shape the answers. And if you cannot escape judgment, perhaps you can choose your judge. "Find Lady Constance," you tell Senna. Tell her the plan has changed, but the destination remains the same. She will understand. Sina nods and begins to rise, but you catch her arm gently. There is something else, something I need you to do, something dangerous. Her eyes brighten with interest rather than fear. In the brief time you have known her, you have learned that Sina finds danger more appealing than safety, perhaps because safety has never been an option for someone in her position. Tell me, she says. Go to the forest cache, the one near the lightning-struck oak. Retrieve the small metal device, the one that clicks and spins. Bring it to the chapel, but do not let anyone see you carrying it. She tilts her head, studying your face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. What will you do with it? Something either very clever or very stupid, you admit. Possibly both. She grins, the first genuine expression of happiness you have seen from her. Those are the best kind of plans, she says, and disappears into the pre-dawn darkness with the silent efficiency of someone who has made an art of not being noticed. Left alone with your thoughts and the growing certainty of discovery, you begin to prepare for the most dangerous performance of your life, because sometimes the only way to escape a trap is to spring it yourself, on your own terms, before your enemies can dictate the rules of engagement. The chapel bells ring for morning prayers, their bronze voices carrying across the village like a summons to judgment. You rise and dress carefully, choosing your worn pilgrim's cloak and your most humble expression. Today, you will need every scrap of medieval theatre you have learned, every gesture and word calculated to serve a deception more dangerous than any you have yet attempted. You make your way to the chapel through streets already busy with morning activity, past merchants opening their stalls and housewives drawing water from the common well. The normalcy of it all seems surreal, as if the world should somehow reflect the drama playing out in your personal universe. But medieval life continues its ancient rhythms, indifferent to individual crisis, focused on the eternal struggle between survival and disaster that defines every day. Father Aldrich is waiting in the chapel, standing near the altar with the patient stillness of someone who has made a difficult decision and now waits to see its consequences. Beside him stands Aldwin, his merchant's garb replaced by a somber tunic that suggests he takes his role as accuser seriously. Their conversation stops when you enter, but their expressions tell you everything you need to know about the morning's agenda. "Good morning, my son," Father Aldrich says, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who has learned to navigate between competing interests. "Master Aldwin has raised some concerns about your presence in our community. Perhaps you would join us in discussion. It is not really a request," and you nod with the resignation of someone who understands that refusal is not an option. But as you walk toward the altar, you feel the weight of Sina's gift in the pocket of your cloak. The small metal compass that will either save your life or seal your doom. "I am always ready to answer questions," you say, your voice steady despite the hammering of your heart. Truth is the foundation of any pilgrimage. Aldwin's smile suggests he appreciates the irony. "Indeed," he says, "then perhaps you can explain this." He produces from his satchel the brass compass he showed you days earlier, holding it up so that the morning light catches its polished surface. But now you see details that escaped you before, the scratches on its case that speak of heavy use, the slight corrosion around its edges that suggests great age, the way its needle wavers uncertainly before settling on its heading. "This device," Aldwin continues, "was found buried near the forest road, along with certain other objects that raise interesting questions about their origin." Your heart sinks as you realize that Aldwin has discovered more than just your compass. How much more, you cannot tell, but his confident manner suggests that his evidence extends far beyond a single mysterious object. "I have never seen such a thing before," you say, which is technically true. His compass is different from yours, older and more primitive, though clearly designed for the same purpose. "Perhaps not," Aldwin agrees, "but you have carried one like it, have you not? A device of similar purpose, but different manufacture. The question hangs in the chapel air like incense, heavy and inescapable. You feel the weight of discovery settling on your shoulders, the crushing pressure of secrets too long maintained. But sometimes, when all other options have been exhausted, the only choice left is a desperate gamble with truth itself. Yes, you say simply, and watch both men's expressions shift from suspicion to shocked certainty. I have carried such a device. Father Aldrich leans forward, his scholarly curiosity overcoming his clerical caution. Where did you acquire such a thing? You reach into your cloak and withdraw Sina's gift, holding your own compass up so that both devices can be seen together. They are clearly related, clearly designed for the same purpose, but the differences between them tell a story that neither man could possibly understand. This belonged to my grandfather, you say, launching into the most dangerous lie of your medieval career. He was a scholar, a student of the ancient arts of navigation. He taught me that some knowledge is too precious to be lost, even when the world forgets how to value it. Baldwin examines your compass with the practiced eye of someone who has handled countless mysterious objects in his travels. The workmanship is extraordinary, he admits, unlike anything I have seen in 20 years of trading. Because it is not of this time, you say, and feel the chapel grow so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. It comes from the knowledge of the ancients, from the wisdom that built the great pyramids and calculated the movements of the stars. It is a desperate gamble, invoking the medieval fascination with lost ancient wisdom, while dancing on the very edge of heresy. In this time, knowledge is suspicious, but not necessarily forbidden, especially if it can be connected to acceptable sources of authority. Father Aldrich steps closer, his eyes bright with scholarly hunger. You speak of the learning of the classical masters, of Ptolemy and Aristotle and others. You agree, grateful for the opening he has provided. My grandfather devoted his life to preserving such knowledge, to preventing the wisdom of ages from vanishing into ignorance. Show me how it works, Baldwin demands, his merchant skepticism warring with his obvious fascination. You hold the compass level, watching its needles swing and settle. It seeks the lodestone mountain. You explain, using medieval terminology for magnetic north, the great mass of iron ore that lies beyond the northern horizon. With such a device, a traveler can find his way even when the sun is hidden and the stars are obscured. Both men lean forward to examine the needle, their eyes wide with amazement as it points steadily northward despite the movement of your hand. You pray silently that neither of them knows enough about natural philosophy to ask questions you cannot answer. Remarkable, Father Aldrich breathes. Such a device would be invaluable for pilgrims traveling to distant shrines. Indeed, you agree. My grandfather believed that knowledge should serve God's purpose, that wisdom used for holy pilgrimage could never be counted as sin. It is exactly the right note to strike, connecting your mysterious device to acceptable religious purpose while invoking the medieval respect for ancient learning. You see Father Aldrich's expression shift from suspicion to fascination, his scholarly instincts overcoming his clerical caution. But Baldwin is not so easily satisfied. If such devices exist, he says slowly, why are they not known? Why do merchants not carry them, soldiers not use them? Because, you reply, meeting his gaze steadily, knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. My grandfather taught that such devices should be carried only by those who understand their proper use, only by those who seek to serve God rather than earthly profit. The insult is subtle but unmistakable, and you see Baldwin's face flush with anger. But before he can respond, the chapel door opens to admit an unexpected visitor, Lady Constance, dressed in her finest remaining garments and carrying herself with all the authority of her noble birth. Father Aldrich, she says, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I trust I am not interrupting important business. The priest bows respectfully, his manner shifting instantly to accommodate nobility even in reduced circumstances. My lady, you are always welcome. We were discussing a matter of scholarly interest with our pilgrim friend. Lady Constance approaches the altar, her eyes taking in the two compasses with apparent fascination. "How marvelous," she says. "My late father possessed several such devices, acquired during his travels to the Holy Land. He claimed they were made by learned Arabs who had preserved the wisdom of ancient Greece. The explanation is perfect, providing exactly the sort of exotic but acceptable origin that medieval minds could accept. Arab learning was respected even by Christians, and the Crusades had brought back many strange and wonderful devices that challenged European understanding of natural philosophy. Indeed, you say gratefully, my grandfather spoke often of the great libraries of Baghdad, where such knowledge was preserved when Europe forgot the learning of Rome. A valuable possession for any pilgrim," Lady Constance continues, "and clearly an object of great age and reverence. I trust no one would suggest that carrying such a family heirloom constitutes anything improper." Her voice carries the subtle steel of aristocratic displeasure, and you see both priest and merchant recalculating their positions. In medieval England, noble opinion carries weight that can crush the ambitions of lesser men, and Lady Constance wields her remaining authority with the skill of someone who understands that perception is often more powerful than reality. Aldwyn looks between you and Lady Constance, his merchant's instincts warning him that this confrontation has moved beyond his ability to control. A suspected heretic is one thing, but a pilgrim defended by nobility is quite another. He makes the wise choice of someone who has survived by knowing when to retreat. "Of course," he says, his voice carefully neutral, "I meant no offense. I was merely curious about such remarkable craftsmanship." He bows to Lady Constance with the proper deference. "I thank you for enlightening us about the device's origins." Father Aldrich nods thoughtfully, his scholarly fascination clearly warring with his ecclesiastical responsibilities. "Perhaps," he suggests, "our pilgrim friend would be willing to demonstrate how such navigation aids might benefit other travelers. The knowledge could prove valuable for those undertaking long journeys to distant shrines. It is a clever solution, you realize, allowing everyone to save face while satisfying curiosity. But it also commits you to a deeper deception, one that will require you to play the role of ancient knowledge keeper for as long as you remain in the village." "I would be honored," you reply, "though such devices require careful handling and proper understanding. Perhaps we might arrange a demonstration for a smaller group of interested scholars." The compromise is accepted all around, and the tension in the chapel begins to ease. But as you pocket your compass and prepare to leave, you catch Sina watching from the shadows near the door, her pale eyes reflecting a knowledge that speaks of secrets shared and dangers navigated together. The immediate crisis has passed, but you know with certainty that your time in this village is ending. The questions have been answered for now, but curiosity has been awakened that will not easily be satisfied. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you begin to plan your next transformation, your next disappearance into the anonymous masses of medieval England, because you have learned the most important lesson of survival in this world. Sometimes the truth, carefully told and properly dressed, can be more convincing than any lie. But the price of such truth is constant vigilance, and the knowledge that one misstep, one careless word, can bring down the entire elaborate structure of deception you have built around yourself. As you leave the chapel, you feel the weight of borrowed time pressing against your shoulders. But for now, you are still alive, still free, and still one step ahead of the forces that would drag you down into medieval justice. It is enough. It has to be enough, because in this world, enough is all that anyone can hope for, and more than most people ever achieve. That afternoon, the village receives visitors that change everything once again. They arrive with the purposeful stride of people who carry authority like a weapon, their horses well fed and their clothing marked with the symbols of ecclesiastical power. Church investigators, sent from the cathedral to examine reports of unusual activities and suspicious foreigners in the region. You watch them from the monastery wall, your blood turning to ice as you recognize the systematic way they question villagers, the methodical manner in which they examine evidence, the patient thoroughness that speaks of experience in uncovering hidden truths. These are not local priests content with simple answers, but professional investigators trained to find heresy and root out deception wherever it might hide. And you know, with the cold certainty of absolute despair, that your carefully constructed deceptions will not survive their scrutiny. The game has entered its final phase, and the time for running has finally come. Epilogue: the weight of memory. 5 years have passed since that grey morning when you slipped away from the village before dawn, leaving behind nothing but questions and a reputation for mysterious wisdom that grew larger with each retelling. 5 years of walking the pilgrim roads of medieval England, moving from shrine to shrine, town to town, never staying long enough to be remembered, never revealing enough to be questioned. You sit now in a different monastery, in a different county, watching the morning light filter through windows of real glass, a luxury that still amazes you after all this time. Your hands, once soft from modern comfort, are now permanently stained with dirt and calloused from constant work. Your body, once cushioned by abundance, has been carved down to muscle and bone by the relentless demands of medieval survival. But you have survived. More than survived, perhaps. You have become something new, something that belongs neither to your original time nor to this one, but exists in the spaces between worlds, in the cracks where different realities meet and merge. The other pilgrims in the hall see you as Brother Thomas now, a learned man with knowledge of navigation and healing, someone who can read the stars and find direction when all other guides fail. They do not know about the devices still hidden in your traveling pack, the last remnants of a world that seems increasingly like a dream. They do not know about the nights when you wake speaking words in a language that has not yet been invented, dreaming of machines that fly and lights that burn without flame. They know only that you are useful, that your quiet wisdom has saved lives and shortened journeys, that your presence brings a kind of peace to the desperate communities of travelers who make up the pilgrim roads. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that is all anyone can hope for in any time. To be useful, to be valued, to leave the world a little better than you found it. You think sometimes of Senna, wondering if she ever learned the art of disappearing she so desperately wanted to master. You think of Lady Constance, hoping she found the new life she sought beyond the reach of her past mistakes. You think of Willis and his dangerous curiosity, of Father Aldrich and his scholarly hunger, of Margot and her healing hands that worked too well for safety. But mostly you think of the lesson this world has taught you, that survival is not about strength or knowledge or preparation, but about adaptation, about learning to bend without breaking, to change without losing yourself completely, to find meaning in circumstances you never chose but cannot escape. The bells ring for morning prayers, and you rise with the practiced ease of someone who has learned to live by the rhythms of monastery life. Your compass, your last link to the world you came from, remains hidden in your traveling pack, unused now for months at a time. You have learned to navigate by sun and stars, by the flow of rivers and the flight of birds, by all the ancient methods that guided travelers long before magnetic needles pointed the way. As you join the line of pilgrims filing toward the chapel, you catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished silver bowl, and for a moment you do not recognize the face that looks back, weathered by sun and wind, marked by the small scars that come from a life lived close to the edge of disaster. It is the face of someone who belongs to this time, this place, this hard world of constant struggle. But in your eyes, something remains of the person who woke up in a medieval forest with a dying phone and no understanding of the world around them. A spark of wonder, perhaps, or simply the deep satisfaction that comes from having survived something that should have killed you. You have learned to be grateful for small things: clean water, warm bread, a dry place to sleep, the simple miracle of waking up alive one more time. You have learned that home is not a place, but a state of being, that belonging is something you create rather than something you find. And as you kneel in the chapel, surrounded by the murmur of Latin prayers and the smoky scent of burning candles, you offer your own prayer to whatever force brought you to this time and place. Not a prayer for rescue or return, but a prayer of thanksgiving for the hard lessons learned and the unexpected grace of finding purpose in the most unlikely circumstances. Because in the end, perhaps, that is what survival really means, not just staying alive, but learning to live with meaning in whatever world you find yourself inhabiting. Whether that world has electric lights or candles, whether it counts time in digital seconds or monastery bells, whether it offers comfort or demands constant struggle, you have found your place in the medieval world, not as the person you were, but as the person you have become. And as the morning prayers end and another day of pilgrimage begins, you step out into the ancient sunlight with the quiet confidence of someone who has learned that home is not where you come from, but where you choose to belong. The road stretches ahead, dusty and uncertain, leading toward shrines and cities whose names you are only beginning to learn. But you walk it now with the steady pace of someone who knows that every step forward is a choice. Every day survived is a victory, and every moment of peace is a gift to be treasured rather than taken for granted. In your pack, the compass rests silent and still, its modern precision no longer needed by someone who has learned to navigate by older, deeper truths. The magnetic needle still points north, still seeks its ancient lodestone, but you have found a different kind of direction in this strange world. A compass that points not toward distant destinations, but toward the daily choices that define who you are and who you choose to become. And that, perhaps, is the most valuable navigation tool of all. The knowledge that no matter how lost you become, no matter how far you travel from everything familiar and safe, you always carry within yourself the capacity to find your way home. Not to the place you started, but to the place where you belong, wherever and whenever that might be. The medieval sun climbs higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the pilgrim road, and somewhere in those shadows walks a time traveler who has learned the hardest lesson of all, that the only time that truly matters is the one you are living in right now, and the only life worth living is the one you choose to create from whatever circumstances fate has provided. END